Welcome, everybody. Welcome. And welcome to an exciting episode of NCFS meets Carbonite Bounty BS. Yes, you've heard it here, guys. We have what some people say the war between worlds. Some would people say, as you saw in our last episode, this may be our Avengers Endgame type moment. But yes, this is a clash among Titans. Our two biggest shows, Nerd Psycho Comic Flick Show and Carbonite Bounty BS, meeting square to square and forging another episode as we call Docket 2 of Nerd Court. Today's episode of Nerd Court, before we get into that, will be sponsored by Carbonite Bounty BS, as you all know, as well as Nerd Cycle Comic Flick Show. So, out of all the platforms you watch on YouTube, I hope everybody's subscribing to Nerd Cyclopedia Transcontinental and look us up on YouTube. You can listen to us on all your streaming platforms, whether it be iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, Google, you name it. You find us, you hear us, look us up, we're on there. Please smash up the likes and please leave any comments on any of our social platforms such as Facebook, Instagram. We have a Carbonite Bounty BS Facebook group. A lot of the guys, such as Thomas Hastings, are involved. And it's a fun place for everybody to voice their opinions. So definitely, please tune in, sit back for this next hour or so, and let's get into the trial. Today's docket, we will have the case of George Lucas's revisions to Star Wars. Some people are against it, some people are for it, but we will see exactly what the judge and the jury will come as a verdict. First off, we'll introduce the plaintiff, who is against the revisions. This man is a man of many names. Some people say more than 1,000 names, such as Dean Malenko. But this guy on our show needs no introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, let's introduce our guy, Moff Tarkin.
Thank you, Bailiff.
And the defense for the revisions would be a guy that really doesn't need an introduction. The co-founder of this channel itself. The guy who has a history of history beyond history. And he is our guy on the buttons, aka our DJ, sound guy, and everything. The defense, let's introduce our guy, Steel City Hitch.
I'm here to rock and roll, and I'll tell you, I think these changes have been maligned for too long, sir.
Let's wait for the
start. Ladies and gentlemen, before we even get going, let's wait for the proceedings.
Yeah, ready now.
Everybody, let's get in our corners. And without further ado, all members of the prosecution, the defense, please rise for your judge of tonight's proceedings, our very own, in the Cleveland Brown Memorial Court, our very own Judge, D.P. Brown.
You may be seated.
Your Honor.
Your Honor.
So, Your Honor, as you've heard, we have a case here, docket 2. We have an interesting one, so to speak. We have a case to where there are some certain Star Wars revisions that, well, basically, some people are against, but we also have the defense who is for these revisions. So we're just going to go over the case of this George Lucas Star Wars revisions, and we'll let you lead off to who you want to hear from first as far as their opening statements.
Thank you, Bailiff. Like your bald head.
Appreciate
really
it.
Good.
Thank you, Judge.
All right. So, I think we're going to start out with, well, first of all, I want to thank you guys for coming to court today. Very pleasurable to see you guys. You guys look, really great tonight. Let's keep this civil. Let's keep this dignified, because we know this argument has been an argument that's been going on for a number of years now. We want to keep this in a civil court, civil proceeding. Okay. So I will bang the gavel if things get out of hand, and just don't let me get to that point. Okay. All right.
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Bailiff, who would call up first? I guess let the defense.
Yes.
Yeah, let's let the defense, defend this position. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, you know what? Let's start off with the prosecution. Okay. Present your argument. Defense. Do you have something to say?
No,
No,
Your
you don't.
Honor. No,
Okay.
I don't.
No, you don't. So I'm the judge here. So we shall start with the prosecution. Present your argument. Opening statements, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I'd like to start with just removing a few things from the plate. This will help the defense also. I'd like to remove any arguments against the audio enhancements. I'd also like to take off the plate any video or THX enhancements. I would like to present this as we are going to say the THX widescreen version of the films is the perfect place to start. So we're going to eliminate audio, we're going to eliminate soundtrack, and we're going to eliminate any video enhancements from the argument. Anything done up until that point are perfectly fine. I have no problem with them. That will help the story.
Your Honor, I must object. The defense the prosecution is attempting to cordon off the revisions done by George Lucas into different buckets that are deemed as acceptable and not acceptable. And it seems to me that the prosecution would like the standard to be subjective rather than objective.
I would like to cross-object and say that these revisions that I've stated have not changed the story, have not altered characters, and have not changed the otherwise perfect vibe of the film as released originally.
Okay, so these are pretty much just opening statements, but I do side with the defense that to take these things off the table is pretty much taking, sectioning off a cordoning off, as he would say, a section of the argument that we're presenting here.
Sustained. Sure.
I say the sustain there. Okay.
Hey, go ahead, say it.
All right. Sustain.
All right. So I'd like to start with introducing a man in his late teens, early 20s that had a vision, a story in his mind that he was looking for a way to get out there in the world. And it came from inspiration from the Wild, Wild West. It came from inspiration from very, very, very early samurai stories, Ronin soldiers. And he found a way to put these ideas into a modern vehicle that he felt that would be accepted by society. It was something new. It was a fresh take on cowboys and Indians, on good and evil, on Knights of the Round Table. It was a modern take. He decided to set this story in outer space, and he had a perfect plate to build this on, and he did so. And he released 3 fine films over the course of 6-7 years under the guidance of Fox Films, 20th Century Fox, with the beautiful soundtrack driven by John Williams, and then story with these actors that he found that built a bond of inspiration, dreams, and we could all see these images on the screen and fall in love with them. The basis of my argument is I'm going to just start with a classic example of if something is not broken, do not attempt to fix or alter that thing, especially if it's running the way it should. A classic automobile, a home that has classic virtue and classic bones to it, a society that's running correctly, that there aren't any potholes of disparage, of prejudice. Why alter these? So as I open up this table I'm sure it's going to be a heated battle with a lot of tense words. I want to also say that we all love these films, but I feel that the enhancements and revisions have taken away and or were not necessary, did not push the plot, push the characters in any better direction than they had already been done by George originally. So, classic place to start here is the scene in the cantina with Han and Greedo.
Well, before we get into specifics, does this complete your opening argument?
It does. I think it does lay enough of the groundwork that I feel that my position will be strengthened through this entire proceeding, sir. So
Okay.
I do.
Excellent. Opening statements there. Prosecution, defense. Do you have opening statements?
Yes, I certainly do, Your Honor. And before I begin, may I take this opportunity to commend Your Honor on an excellent outfit for tonight's
Right.
argument. I just wanted to say I appreciate it's so fresh, just the way it looks with the robe and the sunglasses. Your Honor, you're just such an attractive man, and I just wanted to say that to you right now.
Thank you for bringing that up.
I also would like to say that every day I look at this character of your very attractive children as well, and I would like to say that they are very attractive as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Now, Your Honor is also a very smart man. One of the smartest men I've ever met in my entire life. In fact, Your Honor.
Okay. Do we have an opening statement here, or do we have complimenting the throne?
Do I smell coercion, Your Honor?
Not as of yet. I've been.
Your Honor,
I was waiting for someone to.
I have some 1977 vintage Star Wars figures that I'd gladly mail to you.
Let's order in the court. Let's get back to the subject at hand. Subject at hand. Present your opening argument.
Your Honor, back to where I was. Your Honor, you are very smart, a smart man, and you are a creator.
You've already stated that.
I'll say it again. You're very smart. You are a creator of excellent comic books, and you are an author of some renown. And I declare that as an author, I'm certain, would feel an ownership over your own creations and your own storytelling, and would feel that should you want to revise or change or reissue those stories in any form or medium, then it would be well within your right as the owner of those characters and stories. I would imagine that would be the case, as you are a smart man and very attractive. Today, I am here to defend a man's right to tinker with his own art. And I'll tell you here, I think we're giving 1975 George Lucas a little too much credit here, y'all. George Lucas at that time did not have the muscle to tell the story he wanted, let alone the ability technologically. Fox was breathing down his neck, and he had budgetary concerns. Keep in mind also, and as we go through the record, it will show that there were many other scenes filmed specifically in Tunisia in 1976 that Mr. Lucas did not avail himself of, showing restraint. Also, the record will show that as this movie has been improved over time, society has felt the need to improve its video and audio. And I would say, sir, that subtracting out those improvements from the revisions done by George Lucas over the years, but this is America. I'm done.
All right. That was an opening statement there. What do you think, Bailiff?
Your Honor, I think it's a riveting opening statement, but I really like to get in the meat and potatoes of this case here because they're both giving us good opening statements, but love to hear some supporting evidence as far as why we should and should not support these revisions, so the court can make a proper decision. The prosecution, would you like to, give us your first piece of evidence here?
Yes, I'll start with the big cookie. Han, did he fire first? Okay, so the idea of why the revision happened was that he didn't want to put, all of a sudden, after 23 years, he didn't want to put Han Solo in a light of being the bad guy. For some reason, not 100% sure why, but that is the idea behind the revision, because there was a conflict between Han and Greedo. It got to a point where Han had to defend himself, and he openly can defend himself in this environment. We're talking about that Old West environment where gentlemen carried their firearms openly, and it was known that if there was a conflict and whoever shot first was going to buy it. That was it. So the idea that you had to pad that somehow and make it seem like Greedo fired first, when Greedo was holding an E11 blaster in Han's face for a good portion of 12 minutes. You know, Han at any point could have just taken him out within legal rights, but he didn't. He waited until the certain moment where he felt that he was threatened, and he fired first because that's who he is. Han Solo is that guy. He's the guy that if you're going to push to the limit, he's going to take a stand. Plus the editing, everything having to do with the idea that you are standing or sitting 2.5 feet away from somebody and you're going to miss on that shot. No, Greedo would never miss. There is no way that character, who's also a smuggler, bounty hunter, has killed before, has defended himself before, would have missed that shot. It's inconceivable, Your Honor. It's inconceivable that shot would have missed, which would have allowed Han to fire back under the table with a blaster that he had already unholstered and had ready to go with the safety off. Inconceivable. Han would have been laid out in a pile of smoke if reality had set its ways. But because of editing and poor judgment on, I'm sorry to say, the father's part, the whole scene is trash and should be stricken from the record completely. Wow. It has no place in this story. Unfounded. And if you ask me every time I watch it, it sickens me to see, because I know what's going to happen. Greedo is going to somehow fire up. The shot's going to ricochet off the back of the concrete behind Han. And then, of course, we know what happens. Greedo is cut in half with a laser blast.
Very interesting piece of evidence. Very, very interesting piece of evidence. Defense?
My plan here is to enter the Chewbacca defense from South Park, which is to say that because Chewbacca lives on Endor and not Kashyyyk, where he should live, amongst the Ewoks, that does not make any sense whatsoever. And so we must apply this logic to this scene. Because if Chewbacca lives on Endor, which we know he does, amongst the Ewoks, which are very small Wookiees, then we must not consider that Han shot first.
Excuse me, Your Honor. Can I actually cross-examine the defense?
Yes, you may.
This idea that you have, sir, of Chewbacca living on Endor, exactly how does that relate to the fact that Han Solo, a smuggler, a scoundrel, would put himself in a position where he was to begin with, but then Greedo missed a shot 2.5 feet away. Didn't actually miss. He actually fired up in the air as if to say it's a warning shot. Fired over Han Solo. And what does that have to do with where Chewbacca lived?
All right, let me walk you through this one again.
Please.
I'll do it slowly this time. Chewbacca is a Wookiee. A Wookiee.
From Kashyyyk. He is don't have anything to do with.
He is from the planet Kashyyyk, a planet of large trees and Wookiees that are large animals. But he lives on Endor, where the Ewoks live. And that doesn't make any sense.
So you're actually building my case and saying that the whole scene didn't make any sense.
What I'm saying, and I feel like I've said it a couple times here, is that if Chewbacca, who is a Wookiee, does not live on Kashyyyk and instead lives on Endor where the Ewoks live, that doesn't make it.
I'll let you decide that one, Your Honor.
All right. Present a different argument. Let's get into some more specifics. Okay. The whole.
So you're telling me. So you're telling me that it's inconceivable that this bounty hunter got a shot off against Han Solo. Is that right?
100%.
You're telling me that Han Solo was able to shoot this guy in the stomach fast enough to kill him before his brain could trigger his finger, right? Is that what you're saying to me? In the stomach. Shoot him in the stomach, and the guy couldn't pull the trigger.
100%.
Physiologically, sir, I don't know that that's something that I would believe, especially understanding that Rhodians are, essentially based on insects, and their segmented nervous system would prevent what you're saying from being possible. So the idea that Greedo, a trained bounty hunter, a member of the Bounty Hunter Guild, a bounty hunter from the guild hired by the local daimyo, Jabba the Hutt, to go after Han Solo, a miscreant, in a bar. And you're telling me that you don't think he could get a single shot off? Even one? That to me strains credulity, sir.
He could get a single shot out. Would he miss?
You just told me you've been shot in the stomach, sir. I don't know how this is an inconceivable situation.
He had a shot. He had one shot. At the very least, they both should have shot each other.
Unless, of course, and bear with me on this, there was some sort of unifying force that connected all the living beings in the galaxy together and could direct events as it saw fit.
That's the next movie. We'll argue that one.
Yeah, Your Honor, I don't believe the Wills have a valid point in this interaction.
Yeah,
I do not.
The defense is sort of like gotten off the rails as far as that. Neither of them hold the as far as I know, the force, any parts of the force and everything. So let's stricken that from the record there. Okay.
All right. Let's move on to my next
argument.
Next argument. So the whole idea of going back and doing a special edition is George knew he was going to be expanding on his universe, and he wanted to make sure that this trilogy fit the new trilogy by enhancing it in ways that would bring the things together, which I do agree with in certain aspects. The next part I'd like to talk about is, again, a little bit. Let's fast forward a little bit. Han Solo meet Jabba the Hutt. A very queer scene to have entered in because it really didn't do anything for the story. We got to see Jabba a little early, but that was George's attempt to tie like Return of the Jedi into A New Hope a little bit, which he really didn't need to do. Again, my big problem with the scene is that it's poorly edited. They took a scene that was shot, as our defense specialist did say, George shot a lot of footage in Tunisia, as he said, that wasn't put into film, but he had in the back burner. And one of them was a scene with Jabba, who was a man at the time. He didn't know he wanted to make him a slug. So he shot this scene with a kind of a burly man, much as like myself. And his name was Jabba. And Han at one point walks around the back of him. So when they put Jabba into the scene, they had to CG it over this man. And because Jabba had a long tail, Han had to step on something or step over something, which, if you watch the scene, is almost comedic and also trashy, almost as bad as Greedo missing a shot. To me, aside from the introduction of Boba Fett in this scene, the whole thing was garbage and should have been left out. Never should this scene have been entered into A New Hope. It made no sense. It didn't push the story in any direction. It didn't enhance any of the characters. All it did was make a dismal, almost laughable attempt at very, very early CG editing in a film. Garbage.
All right, defense.
First things first, saying that a scene only introduced Boba Fett is sort of like saying mozzarella cheese hasn't done anything for us except pizza. It's ridiculous. this is a scene that adds a lot to this movie. Number one, it does add Boba Fett, as you correctly pointed out. Boba Fett is in this scene. It is not simply an introduction for Jabba the Hutt, although it does serve as that. But let's not forget, the reason George Lucas did this is because he needed to have his technology ready for Episode 1, so that he could introduce a character that I hate, Jar Jar Binks. Jabba the Hutt here is the first actually fully realized digital character ever done in cinema, predating Jar Jar Binks, whom I hate, by 2 years. So for me, this is the very first go-round of this technology, and I think that it's bad form to talk about all the revisions and improvements that have been done to the prints and to the sound over the years, and at the same time fault this attempt to bring in digital technology. That's all one thing. The other thing is that this does actually add a lot to the story, because it shows you that Jabba the Hutt is the character from Phantom Menace. It ties all of that together, because Jabba's that character that starts in Episode 1 and ends in Episode 6, just like some other characters you may know, like Darth Vader, right? Like the Emperor, right? So I think that's pretty great, number one. Number two, this is going to end a lot of confusion that I had as a kid before they put this scene in, when I was wondering who he owed this money to and why I should care. That's a big piece of the plot of the rest of the movie, and I think that seeing Jabba the Hutt, and especially for us, the seasoned Star Wars fan, really brings home exactly how serious Han's predicament is. And I think that it adds a lot to the jeopardy and a lot to the, a lot to the tension in the end of this movie, when Han is packing up his reward and making off from Yavin 4 so that he can go pay off Jabba. Why does he go in to pay off Jabba? Because we know Jabba's going to send a much better bounty hunter after him than the incompetent guy he sent the first time, right? A guy so incompetent that he couldn't even hit a dude sitting across the table from him. So to me, this all adds to the flavor. And I think it is produced very well. I think George was right not to put it in the first time with the guy that looked like us, right? Just some big dude in a fur outfit. Not cool, right? And he was correct to wait for Jabba the Hutt to arrive. I think this is a great scene. And I'll actually defend this one, unlike the last scene we talked about, which there's not a lot I could offer in defense of that change. I think that change was not as good. But this change makes a lot of sense to me. It sets up the jeopardy waiting for Han after he leaves the Alliance, and it really pushes him out the door. So it makes sense that he leaves. And you know what? It makes what Luke says to him, or it makes what I think someone, Leia says that to him. Oh, you're all about money. All these comments actually hurt him, because he's really in jeopardy. It's not like he's just trying to be a money grubber. I mean, these guys are threatening his life directly before he left. And that was only like, yesterday to him. It's not like this movie takes place over a very long time. It's a trip to Alderaan and back, and that's about it, right? So it's like 3-4 days at the most. So it's not like he's forgotten this event. So for me, I disagree. I think that this is an important scene. It establishes the stakes for Han Solo, and it introduces Boba Fett, which again, that's pretty great. I think it's like saying, everything was terrible about that baseball game except, when the home team won in the 15th inning, right?
You have anything
Definitely
for that?
have that noted, defense.
Anything for that prosecution?
So let me understand. So you're saying that without this scene, and having watched these films in their entirety, in their original form, when you got to Return of the Jedi, did you not have an idea who this character was? Or did you need to have a connection done that had not already been played out in the original dialogue and preservation of the original character builds? So what I'm getting at is, we already knew Han Solo was a desperate guy. We already knew that Han Solo was an experienced criminal, smuggler, saboteur, a established interstellar hunter of gain for himself. Did we need to enhance that in any way? Was there a need to say, well, you know what? We need to really build up this Jabba the Hutt guy, because he's probably the only person that has trouble with Han Solo, or Han Solo has any ill-gotten gains or bad blood. I think Han Solo probably has this bad blood on every system that he's ever touched. Lando Calrissian, IG-88. We hear, we look at the story, if you just watch the trilogy as it was, we already get all this. We don't need to go back and hammer some attempt to experiment with new technology. We already had it. George built this technology in the 70s. Yes, the defense is correct. George started with zero, and he built this up. He created everything from the starship, digital photography of the starships, the everything, the backgrounds, the set design. I'm pretty sure if you look in the dictionary, you look up green screen, George Lucas created that. He built all this technology. There wasn't a need to go back and enhance everything or practice. I just feel if you're watching this film and it's just what it is, I don't feel as a viewer you need this. Or I think if you've seen it hundreds and thousands of times as I have, and then you see this, it's like a glitch. It's like a scratch on your record. It's like something that shouldn't be there.
Except it introduces Boba Fett and Jabba the Hutt, and also makes it explicit who this person is. And this is also, let's not forget that at the end of the prequel trilogy, Boba Fett is way more important to the Star Wars story than he was in 1997. So adding Boba Fett to this is much more important to modern Star Wars than it would have been before the prequel trilogy was made. So this is all part and parcel to that, and does, in my opinion, because it ties episode 6 to episode 4 to episode 3 and 2, right? Because it does all of that. I think, yes, the answer to your initial posit, which is, does this add something to me later on when I see Jabba again? It does. And the other thing it does is it gives me a look at a much more slender and active Jabba the Hutt. He's not grown fat and not grown slothful yet, as, you know, he's this enormous slug in, 2 years? He's like tripled in size. So this young, virile Jabba the Hutt, I mean, you can see why this Jabba is
fat shaming Jabba the Hutt. Order in the court. Order in the court. No fat shaming Jabba the Hutt. Okay. Do that one more time, defense.
He's a slug.
Okay.
A space slug.
You've been warned.
I will in the honor of things, I will give the defense the point that, as I made, Boba Fett introduction there was the most important piece of that whole thing. It should have been done differently. It should have been done better. It was a sloppy redo of the original edit. I would have rather seen Luke at Anchorhead, at Tosche Station. That footage is there too. I would rather have seen that if you needed to interject something that would tie together films. But
who are those characters? They don't come back. That's the thing. Like there's no purpose to having them introduced because Luke doesn't go back. Luke doesn't become a Jedi Master and meet these people again. You know, he meets Big Zarklighter and that's it.
Yeah.
So those
character a little bit, like we understand the relationship between Biggs and Luke. You know, I mean, so that during the Battle of Yavin, we got an idea of how intense that relationship was and where it started.
Okay.
Very interesting points.
You know, it's one thing that is very interesting is that scene on Yavin 4 of Biggs and Luke meeting was added in 1997 into the special edition. So it's very interesting that you would bring up one of those revisions in this case as an example of something that tied everything together and made everything better. And I think that perhaps we are focusing too much on what happened on Tatooine and too little on what happened on Yavin 4. Because Yavin 4 is a place where there were many of these adjustments to improve things, let alone add that scene, as you're saying, with Biggs. Let's think for a moment about what the scene of all the X-Wings taking off from Yavin looked like in the theater in 1977. It was just like beams of light sort of shooting up into the sky. George Lucas went back and added the whole X-Wings taking off. He put all of that digitally into that scene on Yavin 4, giving it much more depth and making it much more in line with what we see in other places. Also, lots of air combat was improved. Lots of the approach shots in Yavin 4 were improved. The Death Star explosion itself, if we want to call that the same, part of the Yavin 4 situation, is also part of that.
But those revisions, again, like I originally tried to preface, did not change course of the film or alter character development. They kept everything the same, and it was a revision, or let's not really a revision. We didn't revise anything. I mean, Gold Leader still died. Porkins still died. There wasn't any change to the story.
Objection, Your Honor. Spoiler alert.
It was
spoiler alert for Star Wars.
Spoiler alert. Okay. Stop right now if you have not watched Star Wars.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Star Wars, turn off YouTube. Wait till you find out
you are a nerd and watching a nerd court. Do not watch this episode or anything nerd related. Okay, so make sure you get all your Star Wars stuff together. Okay, all right. Let's get to another argument.
I'll jump to Return of the Jedi, and I'll say that basically a lot of the meddling that George did was in New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. Return of the Jedi, pretty much, except for a few enhanced scenes, battle scenes, pretty much left intact until the end. The end scene where he tied together celebrations from across the galaxy was done splendidly. I do see the merit, and I do see what his expectations were. The problem I have with it is that at the time when these revisions were done and these edits were put in, we didn't know what these places were per se. They weren't as much in the mind of a typical Star Wars fan. We knew a little of Coruscant just because it was spoken of, or not specifically as Coruscant, but as as where the Republic was. So we weren't really aware of these places per se. So it did kind of cause a jumble. It was kind of like well, first we were on Endor, and then we were on this city planet. And then we were obviously maybe back on Tatooine. We're not sure. It kind of was a confusion. It didn't have a real good set timeline. We did see the statue of the Emperor pulled down. Did that really make sense within the grand scheme of things? I mean, was that really the end of the Emperor? We don't really know, and that kind of assumed a lot of things. But I do understand where that came from. Some of the edits done at the film when they changed the spirits, changed the we got actually the new Obi-Wan in there, the Hayden Christensen. They did pull in the elements from other films, but I felt that we needed to just keep that trilogy together. And I think that was a little bit of a stretch. I like to see the Darth Vader that we originally were faced with, and Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi, in that age. And I didn't think that really enhanced anything or built anything. But again, my big objection to the thing is showing the celebrations over places in the galaxy that we really didn't know where that was. I think it was a confusion at the end of the film.
All right, defense.
First of all, there are a bunch of revisions in Return of the Jedi. We can certainly start with, the victory celebration for sure. I think the victory celebration ties the whole thing together, and it allows you to look at other environs that were not in the original trilogy. We really only see 5 or 6 planets out of a galaxy of 100 billion planets with trillions and trillions of sentient beings. And I think that widening the scope, one, showing us Imperial City, which is what we called it before we called it Coruscant, and showing us the other environs of the prequel trilogy, which were added in after the prequel trilogy, I think put a nice bow on the original, 6-movie saga, especially when you consider that episodes 2 and 3 are all mostly concerned with the Clone Wars and their beginning and ending. I think that seeing those places that we hadn't gone back to yet in the middle part of the story really ties everything together. I think that also, the Force Ghost situation is just, to harken back to my opening argument. You're allowed to change whatever you want, and frankly, the old Darth Vader. If I'm doing a curtain call at the end of episode 6 and I want to curtain call my actors from episode 1, 2, 3, I don't want to see the old Darth Vader. We never even see that guy. Darth Vader in the original trilogy, what his name is James Earl Jones, and that dude that they put in that movie is not James Earl Jones, right? It's a character that's playing the Anakin Skywalker. So for George to go back and say, listen, one, Hayden Christensen played Anakin Skywalker in 2 friggin' movies for 60 years and dealt with all that stuff. Shouldn't we give him a curtain call at the end of this? And 2, to come out and actually state that what Darth Vader keeps telling us over and over, including in the last Obi-Wan Kenobi series, is very true. The Anakin Skywalker that, loved Padme and was Obi-Wan's best friend and Luke's dad is dead, literally dead, killed by Darth Vader, and remains dead until the no that he screams in the Emperor's throne room, right before this. So, and that ties us right to Darth Vader's birth at the end of episode 3. We get his birth and death are accompanied by the same regretful, mournful yell. I think that these revisions add a whole lot of depth to the Star Wars universe. And I think that what they do is make, again, the story cohesion even stronger than it was when we were only looking at the smaller piece. When we only had that much of what Star Wars is now revealed to us and before 1997.
But did they make it better? Did they make viewing episode 4, 5, 6 a better experience? If you saw these films, if you watched, which you can't find the unrevised versions unless you owned them previously. They've been stricken from the record. Disney doesn't accept them. You can't find them anywhere. If it's on a TV channel somewhere, you're going to see these revisions. You can't. They have taken away your option. They have taken away your option, Your Honor, of viewing the original trilogy for your own point of view. It's almost censorship in a very ugly way. And people that have never seen the original trilogy, it's also given a great disservice because they can't see where this emotional story came from. All they can see now is a multi-billion-dollar redo project that has some merit, but in a lot of ways wastes time and money and takes away from the story, which is supposed to be gritty and raw and, with that dirty grime of the Old West, and with the sloppy politics and the evil with the big hammer, and how the good and how the rebellion comes up. And now we're just watching special effects instead of watching a story.
Your Honor, it should have pleased the court. I would like to introduce another example of the changes made by George Lucas here to this story. In addition to bringing back the correct actor for Anakin Skywalker, Hayden Christensen, we also have the introduction in the beginning of this movie, a scene that I'm not sure if the prosecutor either forgot or perhaps simply conflated again with the original trilogy that he seems to love so much, and conflated these revisions that were made that seem to have ruined the movies that he loves that he doesn't notice. So let's take a look at another one of those. The Max Rebo Band in the opening of Return of the Jedi. This entire musical number is added to A Star Wars by George Lucas, making this scene in Jabba's palace weirder than anything else that we had seen in Star Wars yet. And I love how weird this thing is. I love that everybody's into this insane song that's being sung by like aliens with weird mouths that could not they're making sounds that don't sound like they could come out of human beings, right? I know they're adjusted or whatever, but it's super nifty. I think it's a really great scene. I think it adds a lot of depth because, look, Job is a gangster. And what do you see if you go into one of those old school saloons, right, on the Old West? Someone's in there playing the piano. You know, you talk to old like blues guys or old blues pianos players. Like Al Capone would kidnap them for 3 days, make them play the piano for 3 days, and like stuff their pockets full of money and send them home. So this is a thing that's part of gangster culture. These in many cases attractive singers, and we get an attractive singer, except and should it please the court, I would not presume to understand Hati's beauty standards. But what I will say is that they are alien to me in the same way that I do not understand whether or not Jabba's weight gain is a positive or negative thing as viewed in his species. So I cannot comment on whether or not that is shameful or not, Your Honor, to clarify a previous argument.
All right. You're very close there, defense.
Okay. I know where the line is, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Let me say again that I appreciate the wiseness of your decisions. And you are a million-watt smile man, and I appreciate that. But these scenes in Jabba's palace give us more depth. Again, more depth. And why is that important? Because later on, we're going to have a whole series about Jabba's palace. So there was very pressure for them to add these scenes to flesh out some of the layout. Give us a little bit more of the cast of characters. And what else do we get here in the revisions? A little bit of saucy, flirty Boba Fett.
So that scene was already in the film. There was already a band. It didn't need to be a Broadway show. There wasn't any need to take this dark scene, which it's dark in that this is the scene we see Ula die. This is also a build up to the scene where we're going to soon see Jabba and Luke conflict. Spoiler, sorry. But the scene itself.
Your Honor, I object.
The scene
Your Honor, the
itself,
prosecution is dangling these spoilers over the court as if they can tell us how it happens in these shows. I just object to it.
Order in the court. If you have not seen Star Wars, again, if you are a nerd and have not seen Star Wars, how many years now has the first trilogy been out, or the middle three, or the Bay Bailiff? Can we get a exact count? 45. I heard someone say. Okay, then you need to stop this video, this live right now that you're watching. Watch the trilogies and the prequels, and then come back, and enjoy our show. All right.
And I would challenge you, Your Honor, and I would challenge you to watch the original trilogy. I would challenge you to go out and find it.
If you can find it.
If you can find it.
You're asking the audience to do a lot of work.
Sometimes great work must be had.
Your Honor, may I ask Your Honor a question?
Sure.
Your Honor, is Coca-Cola a popular drink?
Oh, yes, it is.
Would it be hard for Your Honor to find a Coca-Cola? Should I ask Your Honor to go find one?
Not at all.
Your Honor, it stands to reason that if we are not able to find these original trilogies, these original versions of these trilogies, that they are not popular at all.
It's called censorship, sir.
Your Honor, to harken back to my opening argument, a man cannot censor his own art.
Order in the court. Order in the court. To be honest, prosecution, that is sort of like asking, to use the defense's metaphor, that's sort of like asking us, our audience, to try to find an RC Cola. Okay?
Outside of class.
Your Honor, actually, it would be Cherokee Red, which is seen to fell off the face of the earth. It's fell off the face of the earth.
Your Honor, I would like to petition the court to bring back Cherokee Red.
Sure. That's another nerd's court for itself. Literally. Literally.
We're the prosecution. We're not in the business of requiring our audience, the nerds that they are, the nerds that actually go and do their homework as much as they do to try to make corrections and comments and dictations on what should be done. Okay, so if this is the work that they choose to do, let them do that on their own. Okay. All right. So before we wrap this up, because I'm not going to let this go on all night, you guys. Okay. Do we have any more arguments from this trilogy, from any revisions that George Lucas has done to present here, so I can think over, and give my verdict later. Anything else?
I would like to hit on one point that the defense brought up about the face of Darth Vader and who we should have had at the end of the film.
Okay.
Sebastian Shaw, a very fine English actor, presented the first time that we saw Darth Vader in a very human way. And I think if you watch the original scene and the way Sebastian looked at Luke, I think there was a tight bond. There was a moment where you actually felt the emotion of father and son seeing each other for the first time. Luke had never seen his father, ever. So this is a moment that is
very emotional,
encapsulated. Okay? It's a time where we see this for the first time, and it works. And it has value. And I think the way that builds to the end of the film, and again, we see Luke turn around and very emotionally stare at the three people who really molded his current life and his future. And the way they look back at him, I think that was a moment that needed to be preserved. I think the enhancement really took away from it, because I don't think Hayden Christensen really had that vibe. It didn't sit well with me as a
objection, Your Honor. Objection. I will not have the performance of Hayden Christensen as the actual Anakin Skywalker maligned in this day and age, in the year 2022, after he has performed so well as the scarred Anakin Skywalker.
Overruled. The guy has not done quality acting for years, so it remains to be seen how he will eventually do. Okay, so objection overruled.
We can move to closing arguments, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. I'll give you. While we're on to prosecution, let's start with you for closing arguments.
So, in closing, I just want to impart on the court and honorable defense and honorable bailiff, thank you for listening to us and listening to us speak emotionally about a story, a film, characters with plots, subplots that has changed us and helped develop the humans that we are from childhood. And I just want to say that, sometimes when things are done in a certain way, it's best to let them lie. It's best to let them go and have them cherish themselves in the history and the respect that they had originally been done. Yes, modern technology has improved. If these films were shot now, brand new, would these objections, would these problems that I have be of such an emotional value? Probably not. But because these are changes that took place 30 years after the original material was done, I feel that none of it changed the course of the film, enhanced any of the aspect of the story, improved the viewer's enjoyment or understanding of where the story fit in the bigger picture. I feel that the trilogy, if left alone the way it was, would fit beautifully into the new trilogy without any clunkiness. I don't feel anything would be out of place. The characters would ride just as the way they should, and the films would walk together from 1, 2, 3 into 4, 5, 6 and including the new Rogue One and the Solo film would all fit very nicely in without these added embellishments that has been done. Your Honor.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Defense, closing arguments.
Your Honor, it has been an honor to represent the vision of George Lucas circa 2010 for the Nerd Court today. You have been a very wise arbiter today. Moff Tarkin, you've been an admirable and illustrious person to argue against. And I've appreciated the order that the bailiff has kept today. This has been a very fun argument for me to make. One aspect of this that I've been saving is to talk about the missing person from the original trilogy, who came in the prequel trilogy and has become, as we have completed our chronological watch, one of the most important people in the Star Wars universe, and that is the face and voice of the clone troopers and Boba Fett, Tamura Morrison. One of the main things that I liked the most about the revisions that George Lucas made was to go back in and re-record the dialogue of Boba Fett with Tamura Morrison's voice, because that immediately grounds us to not just the prequel trilogy, but the cartoons and everything that features the clone trooper. Anybody could be in that armor. But we know that it's a Tamura Morrison, right? We know it's a clone, and we know it's way too late for them to still be around, running around like they're young kids, right? So to me, these revisions are emblematic of a change that George Lucas underwent when he decided to take his singular movie of Star Wars and start revising it by changing its title to Episode 4: A New Hope for its re-release before Empire Strikes Back in 1980. So the idea that these documents were not living for the entire duration of their creation, I think, is sort of short-sighted and ahistorical. I don't think that it complies with the version of reality that we inhabit, frankly, where George Lucas is just going to do what he's going to do. And to the question of whether or not these things ruined these movies, I again have to come back to the fact that it's hard to keep straight what was added and when. It is so interwoven into the fabric of these movies that the changes that George Lucas made have to be so minor that we get confused about where they are for the most part. Are there some notable exceptions? Yeah. Could I offer any sort of defense for Han not shooting first? I think we saw what happened when I tried to do that. And so I mean, look, I'm not here to say that this is some sort of 49-0 drubbing or whatever. But I think that when you look at these revisions, these changes that George Lucas made on the whole, on the balance, what they do is they add to the story, they expand the world, and they bring you more into the deeper reality of Star Wars, which is as a media conglomerate.
Oh, boy.
Interesting,
You
Your
guys,
Honor.
hey, the bailiff, they presented some really
Yes.
tough arguments. You guys have given me a lot of material to go over for this next week before I present, my final verdict. I mean, as a creator myself, it's the defenses, stated that
Very good looking one.
there's a lot to be said. So I have a week to go over this, and we will present our argument, our verdict, come next week here. You want to close us out here, bailiff?
Yes, I'll
Actually,
definitely.
before I do that, I want to thank you, the audience, for also listening to us. I also want to thank the defense and the prosecution for being in this court today, and also the bailiff, with this nice bald head there, so just keep it shining, buddy. Keep it shining. So close us out, bailiff.
Of course, and once again, as the judge, Your Honor, said, we definitely appreciate the defense as well as the prosecution coming on tonight, as well as all our listeners out there. We really appreciate you guys coming to this special episode where our very own Carbonite Bounty BS meets Nerd Psycho Comic Flick Show. So, as we stated off the bat, for those who came on late, great way to interact with us on all our platforms, but to see these awesome episodes. This is docket 2 of Nerd Court. The first docket was a case of the Marvel, and keep in mind, guys, there are a lot more dockets coming forward. So we will have more judges, we will have more defense, more prosecutions, and other bailiffs, as well as maybe even jury. So, as we've stated, we appreciate everybody listening to this case, and please tune in next week for the decision known as the verdict. So until next week, guys, as we say in Carbon Out Bounty BS, this is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. And as we say on Nerd Psycho Comic Flick Show, see you next time. Same nerd time, same nerd channel.